Welcome to the Unlist. Today we're doing a quick crash course in Middle Eastern perfume. Now I'm by no means an expert on this field because there is literally thousands of years worth of history surrounding perfume from the Middle East, going all the way back to North Africa and the original Egyptian civilization. Plus, a lot of the stuff also crosses over with Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, places like that. These places are both general origin points for materials that Western perfumers would later adopt, right? Jasmine from India, rose from Damascus, incense, olibanum, myrrh, things from areas that are now part of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, such places, okay? Turkey. So, suffice to say, a lot of what would come up the spice road, right, made its way into Europe, would shape the trajectory of European perfumery, but all of that stuff pre-existed in Persia, okay, in the Ottoman Empire. So that's just the way it is. And they've had it for a lot longer than people in the West have. Now, that said, there is both ups and downs to Middle Eastern perfumery. Perhaps the biggest up is that with Middle Eastern perfumery, a lot of materials that are rarefied and expensive in Western perfumery are not so much in Middle Eastern perfumery. And again, it comes down to them being the origin point. A lot of ambergris, even though it's not found in the desert, a lot of ambergris is processed by Middle Eastern oil houses. Therefore, a lot of Middle Eastern brands can use real ambergris in their perfume and not sell it for a ton of money. It may not be the cheapest thing, it may not be Avon, okay, but you can get a Middle Eastern fragrance with real ambergris in it to some degree for the price of a designer. Whereas, you know damn well, a Western perfume house like Guerlain putting real ambergris in a perfume, they're going to want $400 for that. It's all about supply chain, my friends. You still want reasonably priced perfumes that have real sandalwood oil in them, you've got to buy from India. You want reasonably priced perfumes that have real olibanum, real frankincense and myrrh in them, guess what? You got to buy from Middle Eastern perfumers because that's where it starts. You want good Turkish rose perfumes, you got to buy Turkish perfumes. It just doesn't get any simpler than that. That's it, guys. That's the bottom line. But the bad comes from the fact that you may not appreciate the styles and presentation of those perfumes because they're not made for Western noses. They're not made for Western tastes. A lot of times, these things are bought as exports. Okay? They're not even meant to leave their regional markets, but someone decides to export them. And you buy them that way. There's no official representation of those brands in many cases, right? Or they might have some things created for what they think Western noses will want, but the other things are not available to you officially. I've seen many cases where Middle Eastern brands have a whole selection for the French market, for the US market, for the UK market, but then a whole other selection that you don't have access to on your version of their website, but is out there. Can be bought in the gray market, can be bought from discounters, okay, from eBay. So regional perfumery is becoming more and more a thing, especially as the tastes and purchasing habits of the world shift around. I've made mention of this in other videos, how America is kind of a dying market for perfume because of our extreme income inequality. People these days are stressed about whether they're going to have a place to live, whether they can afford to buy a new car, whether they can shop at the fucking grocery store, whether their jobs are going to get replaced with AI or not. So getting perfume is like the last thing on their mind. So unless you're a millionaire, or someone like that, you live in your little ivory tower, you're the only one still shopping at Nordstrom these days in 2024. Everyone else is busy trying to hustle and get deals and stuff, or just not buying perfume, just being happy with a bar of soap and some shampoo because, like I said, they need to eat, need to keep the lights on. So a lot of the more expensive, more exclusive, interesting brands have pulled completely out of the U.S., making U.S. a bit of a sort of barren wasteland now where only the commercial fragrances survive. only the things that can be sold at a very high margin, low cost, and large volume, right? So the Invictuses of the world and all that sort of thing. So Europe definitely has more of an old school French-centric vibe, a lot of florals, a lot of classic things based around aldehydes, mosses and woods, okay, things like that. The UK has a different feel. We've gone over this elsewhere. The Middle East has a very independent flavor from all that because they developed before all that other stuff did, as I said, before all that, centuries, millennia before all that. And they've also developed in relative isolation, whereas a lot of French and Italian, UK and US perfume houses exchange ideas because they're all hiring the same chem firms. Everyone in the US and Canada, all across Europe, they're all hiring the same Firmenich, the same IFF, the same Givaudan, Robertet, Mon, all that stuff, Takasago. But in the Middle East, their own oil houses, their own resources. They are the source, as I said. Not the only source. France makes a lot of raw materials too. Clearly, they have jasmine fields in Grasse, France. But a lot of materials come from the Middle East, so the buck starts there. And thus, they don't need to reach out and buy stuff from IFF. They don't need to reach out and get stuff from Takasago. They can just source their own. It's right there. And that independent feel, the development of the perfumes in the Middle East, like I said, may be bad for some people. Good for me because I like different things. I do. I like variety. Variety is the spice of life for me. But for those of you who want your typical Quadics, Fougères, Chypres, your Orientals, you want your, soapy things, your very typically French things. You're used to that, the aldehydes, you're used to the oak moss bases or the woody bases, the clean musks, right, all that stuff. And then suddenly you're slammed in the face with Hyraceum and very, very phenolic ouds and rich patchoulis and heavy, syrupy, sweet, spiced ambers. And you're getting indoles and scatols and all this stuff out the waz, and you don't know what to make of it because it is just way over the top. It is a level of flavor you were not expecting. It's like going to a Thai restaurant. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you go to a Thai restaurant and you look on the menu and you order like the longest named thing on that menu in Thai, and then you ask for the spice level to be at 5, right? So you get something like Kaplau Gai Kai Do or something like that, which is minced chicken with basil, and then with an egg on top over rice. You order that, and then you ask for it with a spice level of 5. Never having eaten Thai food a day in your life, and you get that. Or you go right for the massaman curry. You skip over the Penang, go right for the massaman curry, and you ask again for the spice level 5. And you get the big blast of coconut in your face, the big blast of the red bell peppers, the potatoes, and a super spicy Thai curry that's also sweet, and it's just a whole lot. And your puny little mayonnaise, Wonder Bread, bologna, Walmart shopper taste buds are not ready for that. So what happens? Happens. You can't handle it. You go back to your Wonder Bread and your Oscar Mayer, right? And you call your mom and you cry over the phone about the flavor explosion that happened in your mouth. Well, that's kind of what happens with Middle Eastern perfumes, guys. That is exactly what happens with Middle Eastern fragrances, is you get a whole lot. You get very, very opaque, redolent, resinous, spicy, musky, floral, and that can be overwhelming for some people. So they're not used to that. They're used to their transparent accords, their isoe super, like I said, right? Even the vintage guys with the oak moss and the bergamot oil, right? Even those guys get taken aback. They get blown away by the Middle Eastern stuff because they're not really ready for it. They think they know what a powerhouse is because they have Koros. They think they know what a powerhouse is because they have an old bottle of like Z14 or something, but then they get hit with the big, fat, whoosh, censored, but they get hit with the big, fat, oud fragrance, and they don't know what to make of it. So that could be bad for some people. For me, it's good. Like I said, I like it. But yeah, you get a lot of materials, in their perfume for prices that you may not expect to get them at. But then the trade-off is it's a culture clash. It's a big culture clash that if you're not dipping your toe in it lightly and getting educated, right? These aren't your Tom Ford Ouds, okay? These are not. These are not your Tom Ford Ouds. These are not your MFK Ambers, your gummy, vanillic MFK. Sorry, Francis Kurjan, I love your work, but your Ambers are kind of bullshit. I'm not going to lie. Your Ambers are kind of bullshit. But that said, you know, this is not that stuff, okay? This is a whole different ballgame, and you've got to be ready for it. Which is funny because Francis Kurjan is from Armenia, so he should know a thing or two about this kind of perfume. He's closer to it than some people were growing up. But yet he still walks away with a fragrance like Grand Soir. I don't get it. Anyway, not trying to take shots, but it is what it is. So, another thing to consider, the idea that Middle Eastern perfume is not gendered, right? That blows some people's minds, knowing what they know about Islamic culture in those parts of the world, knowing what they know about what they see on the news. Some of that is not entirely true, by the way. You know, Western media likes to make those places seem big and scary. But there is some truth to some of the things. And one of the things people don't really talk about when it pertains to perfume from the Middle East is why it's unisex. Why do guys in the Middle East feel comfortable wearing big, fat, sweet rose perfumes, right? Where like literally everywhere else in the world, guys are scared to death of a rose. They see a rose and you think it's it's like literally a nest of killer bees or something, right? They're ready to run screaming from it. Well, the reason is, and this is not me trying to be woke, all right, for those of you guys who like to take shots at me for that. This is not me being political. This is literally history. But in the Middle East, there are rules about who wears perfume, how, and why. And those rules pertain to gender. I don't agree with those rules, granted, but I'm also not from that part of the world. However, the observance of those rules predicate the existence of non-gendered fragrances, because the rules about wearing the perfume are concerning gender of the person wearing it. So it no longer becomes an issue about what smells masculine and what smells feminine, because the rules have men wearing louder, more obvious perfumes in public in general. Women are typically not allowed to wear perfumes at all in public. And if they're with, you know, a husband or a partner, which typically marriage is the only way to have an actual allowed partner in those parts of the world. So you can't have a boyfriend necessarily. Got to marry them. But then they can wear a little something with his permission. I know. It's get out the pitchforks and torches, but that's the way it is there, guys. The ladies are not really allowed to wear the perfume in public if they're single. And if they're with a guy, they can wear a little bit. They can wear more at home when they're away from the public eye. And of course, they're covered, right? Like I said, hijabs and such are a thing. But that modesty, that enforced modesty for women, you know, that's considered, it's considered allowed, right? Anything outside of that would be not allowed. That is why there really aren't genders in perfume, because there doesn't need to be, because you're never going to really come across a woman that smells very loudly of perfume, if at all. The guys, on the other hand, can peacock it up. The guys can put on as much as they want, and they're encouraged to wear a lot of perfume because it's seen as a calling card there. It's not flexing. It's not braggadocio. It's not anything other than you're greeted by my sillage. You're greeted by my scent cloud as like a handshake, right? It's a gift to the other person who you're exchanging words with. So you smell each other's wake, and you're like, yeah, you smell good. Ah, well, you smell good. Ah, let's be friends, right? We both smell good. That's just the way it is there. Whether you like it or don't like it, that's a thing. And that's why it doesn't really matter, right? Now, things are starting to change a little bit there, obviously they have gendered perfumes now because they're mimicking more Western trains of thought. Like alcohol perfumes weren't really a thing in the Middle East until like the 80s. When Amouage, I'm not calling them the first, but one of the first known Middle Eastern creators of Western style perfume was Amouage from Oman, owned by the Sultanate of Oman, right? Started by the actual ruler of the country, started Amouage. Partnered with Guy Robert, actually, famous French perfumer. The two of them, the Sultan and Guy Robert, came together, made Amouage, launched perfumes. They were a combination of Middle Eastern cultural aesthetic, but Western techniques. So the alcohol, the water, okay, aldehydes and such. A lot of synthetic materials that had never found their way into perfume over there until then, until the 80s, right? You didn't really have aldehydes in your traditional makalats or your bakurs. You didn't have aldehydes in your atars and such. Just wasn't a thing. But when Amouage came along, it became more of a thing. And that would only increase over time. Like my video about Jean-Louis Vermeil, I think it is, right? Jean-Louis Vermeil, which Darren Allen told me that it's Vermeil, I believe. I could be saying it wrong, but or Vermeil. Jean-Louis Vermeil, my video on that house, they're from Tunisia, right? So there you go. They're from Tunisia, but they wanted to break into the market in France and Europe, so they disguised themselves as a number of different French brands. They used not just Jean-Louis Vermeil, but they also used a couple other ones too. Jean-Jacques Vivier is one that they used, not a real person. Okay. Point is, that was another step towards the Western direction with perfume from that part of the world. And we would only see more of that into the 90s and 2000s, right? We would see a lot of classic, or at least classic to that part of the world, a lot of classic, older Middle Eastern houses like Al Haramain, okay? Al Rahab have been around for a long time. Asghari. These are all really old brands over there. They've been around forever. They started to tiptoe into alcohol perfume too. And the thing is, and here is the thing that I need to dispel. We are 17 minutes into the video, but Middle Eastern perfume houses are not clone houses. They make clones, but they're not clone houses. You just never see any of the products that are not clones on FragranceNet, Fragrance X, or whatever. That's all that's being ordered. That's what sells over here. They know they can make a cheaper, more potent version of a popular Western perfume because they use the same tools we do. Gas chromatography, spectral analysis, all right? They use the same aroma chemicals because they figure out how to make them or they order them from somewhere. They can make a reasonable facsimile of Creed Aventus. They can make a reasonable facsimile of Tobacco Oud or of Baccarat Rouge 540 or of Invictus or Chanel Mademoiselle or whatever, okay? Whatever. They can do it very easily. They literally have centuries of experience. This is nothing. This is light work to them. Light work. So when you see stuff like L'Adventure by Al Haramain, you're like, oh, must be another clone operation. Wrong. Incorrect. They have atars, they have ouds, they have ambergris tinctures, they have all kinds of stuff that you will never see. Same with Al Rahab, okay? A lot of them do the same thing. Rasasi, the same thing. Rasasi has some ouds that will make your hair stand up on the back of its neck, all right? Rasasi has some very potent ouds, very, very thick, heavy, authentic smelling ouds that will make your hair stand on the back of its neck. But when you think of Rasasi, you think of Hawas or La Yucca-Warm or one of those. That's what you think of, right? You think of the clone stuff. But that's not all they're about. Now, there are some brands that are a little more focused on Western styles. Armaf is a good example. They're a relatively young brand from the Middle East, but Armaf does tend to stay more into the Western field of things. Navitus is another one, and I've already made my video on them. I'm not a fan of Navitus because Navitus goes after influencers, and they get the influencers to push their product. but they are also from the Middle East, and all of their perfumes are of a Western style. So they don't really do anything regionally reflective of the culture, but a lot do, okay? You will find plenty of things from brands like Asghar, brands like Rasasi, brands like Latafa, okay? Maison, Alhambra, and some of you will comment on how cheap those things are and how rough around the edges they are, and yeah, some of them can be, because again, they're not putting a whole lot of effort into these Western creations, because that's not where they make most of their money, right? So Al Haramain doesn't make most of its money selling clones. They make most of its money selling locally in Saudi Arabia to that market there. Nabil, right? A lot of you don't even know what Nabil is. Nabil is a Dubai brand, and it is one of the most expensive perfume brands in the world. You think Creed's expensive, okay? You think Royal Crown's expensive. You think Raja Dove is expensive. No. No. You have not seen anything until you have seen perfumes from Nabil, also known as Spirit of Dubai. You've seen Spirit of Dubai perfumes and Nabil perfumes. You will see fragrances that cost in the thousands of dollars, not 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 like some of the Frederick Malle stuff or some of the higher end Raja Dove stuff. I'm talking thousands of dollars. Like, you can literally buy a used Toyota Camry from Auto Trader or CarMax or whatever. $5,000, $6,000, right? It's a beater. It's got 200,000 miles on it. Or you can buy a single bottle of perfume. They even have perfumes that go into the tens of thousands of dollars. I've seen Spirit of Dubai stuff, Nabil stuff, top out at 25, 30 grand. Granted, the bottles are like this big, and they're diamond encrusted and gold and platinum and crystal and etched. And I'm sure like most of the money is in that bottle. And they've got battery operated sprayers, so when you stand in front of it, it just sprays you with a motion sensor. That's the kind of stuff. But these are perfumes that are selling to literal rulers of nations. The princes, okay, these are the guys buying this stuff. Like they buy Lamborghinis, like they buy Bugattis and use them as daily drivers. They're the ones buying these $30,000 bottles of perfume, guys. But they exist. And you will only find them in the Middle East. You'll find them in places like Qatar and places like Dubai. You don't believe me? Go check it out. Like a $450, $500 fragrance from Nabil, that's entry level, bro. That $400 fragrance from them, that is bottom line. That is your foot in the fucking door for that brand. It only goes up from there. Only goes up from there. So yeah, man. Like I said, little different world than it is, in Nordstrom or Sephora or Ultaland. Little bit different world, okay? A little different than your typical Macy's counter, all right? Or your perfume emporium at your local mall, if you still have one of those. Most of those are gone now. A little different world from the high street, guys. A little different. But if you're willing to learn the culture, if you're willing to learn the styles, the ambers, the ouds, the rich rose perfumes, the jasmine perfumes, the ylang-ylang stuff. They like to use a lot of heavy, rich citruses, orange oils, things like that. If you want to get your hands dirty with that, there's a lot of good stuff going on there, and it's worth checking out. So this has been the Unlist, my little crash course on Middle Eastern perfume. Correct me if I got anything wrong, especially with the whole observance of gender with the wearing perfumes, but that's what I read. And I double and triple checked it, but then again, I'm a guy in the West, so I could have it wrong. But thanks for watching. Catch you next time.